this video, I'm going to share with you two different recipes for keto crackers, one savory and one sweet. This is going to be my savory cracker. I thought I had some garlic powder. It calls for garlic powder, but I didn't, so I'm going to use onion powder instead. But these are the ingredients that you need to make keto crackers. So the first thing you're going to do is, in a little bowl, you're going to put 1/4 cup of water and 1 tablespoon of chia seeds, and then you're just going to let them soak until all of the water is absorbed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then when it's all absorbed, I'll come back and we will finish this recipe. This took considerably longer than 15 minutes to absorb, so if you're making this recipe, take that into consideration. Give yourself a good half an hour for this chia to absorb all the water. But look at that. It's amazing that 1 tablespoon turned into this. That's cool. So the next step is to mix up all the rest of the ingredients, which would be 1 cup of almond flour, 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil, 1 tablespoon of butter, if you can get it out of the wrapping, and then all of the seasonings. Now it calls for a teaspoon of garlic powder, and I said I didn't have any garlic powder, so I have onion powder. I'm going to use that. And then it calls for a teaspoon of salt, but I think it's, instead of a teaspoon of salt, I'm going to put maybe like half a teaspoon of salt. And then it just dawned on me that I'm going to add some of this everything but the bagel seasoning. I'm going to put like a tablespoon of this in there. And it has salt in it, so that's why I'm going to lower the amount of salt, but maybe I just won't even put any salt in. I hate stuff that's too salty. I'll just mix that up, and maybe I'll taste the batter and see if I want to add some salt to it. So you just mix all this really thoroughly until it's completely combined. It didn't say to melt the butter, but I'm wondering if maybe I should have. All right, I'm just going to get in here with my hands. Make it so much easier. This might seem a little weird, but I'm going to taste this before I add the chia, just to see what the saltiness level is. Oh, definitely does not need any more salt. Glad I tasted it and didn't just add the salt in. All right, the next step is to add your chia gelatin. And then you mix that in. So if I haven't already said, I've got my oven heating at 400 degrees, preheating, and then you take this dough and you divide it into fourths, It's just to make rolling it easier. Because you want these super thin. You're literally making crackers. So you want it cracker thin. I've got a piece of parchment here, and I put another piece of parchment on top of it. And I bought these sheets of parchment off of Amazon, and they are so handy. And then I got my trusty rolling pin here, and I'm just gonna roll these out as thin as I possibly can get them. So that is about as thin as I can get it, and actually started to squish out the edges. So I'm going to stop there. Then you want to transfer it onto a baking sheet. This baking sheet's not quite big enough. Let me get a different one. I have it on a bigger baking sheet now. I'm going to carefully peel this top layer of parchment off. And then with a pizza cutter, I'm going to cut these into cracker-sized shapes, rectangles. At least I hope they're breaking. I think I'm going to cut this bit off the edge here. Put it back in the bowl for the next batch. And you have to do this 4 times. I don't have enough room in my oven for very many pans, so I'm going to have to do this 1 pan at a time. But they don't bake very long, so that's good. All right, let me see if I can see. I don't even know. I think it's cutting through. Hopefully this is making score lines. Listen, I'm going to pull this off of here because I think it's going to be easier to cut it when it's not on that baking sheet, because I can go all the way to the edge. So yeah, cut them before you put it on the baking sheet. These are super duper thin. You maybe wouldn't even have had to cut them or roll them this thin. But it said on the recipe to roll them as thin as possible, so that's what I did. Now these are definitely going to be rustic looking. They are not going to be from a factory. Everything exactly the same size. But that's good. I like stuff like this. If it tastes anything like the batter, these are going to be delicious. Okay, now we put her on the baking sheet. Bake these for 8 minutes or until golden brown. So I will bring you back when these are ready to come out of the oven. I'm going to work on the other next batches and get those ready to go, so I can just plop these on the cookie sheet, and put them in the oven as these come out. It's a good thing I checked them, because they would have been burnt. 8 minutes is way too long, especially if you roll them out as thinly as I did. These were in there for about 7 minutes. I like things extra crunchy and crispy, so I won't mind these. But the second batch I just put in for 5 minutes, and I'll check them after 5 minutes. But these look really good. I'll let them cool, and then I think they will kind of just break apart. They smell really good too. So I've got 1 pan in the oven, and I got 2 more balls of dough to make. So when I get as you can see, scoring them, they definitely just kind of fall apart on the tray. I've been nibbling at these crackers while I've been taking them off the parchment. They are delicious. They are absolutely delicious. Impressions of this recipe. They are so easy to make. I was a little bit afraid to make crackers because I thought, oh my goodness, it was going to be daunting. But it's so easy. The things I will do differently next time. The hardest, okay, let me back up. They were so easy to prepare, to mix together, and to roll out. The hard part was regulating how much time they were in the oven. As you can see, there's quite a difference between this cracker and this cracker. And every batch I put in the oven was in the oven for a different amount of time. I don't know why that is. This one, the first batch I was in the oven for 7 minutes. The next batch was in the oven for 5 minutes, and it was a lot darker. I think it had to do with the pan. I had 2 different kinds of pans that they were cooking on. I don't think it had anything to do with how thin they were rolled, because they were all rolled pretty thin. The other thing, I would say that was the hardest, regulating the temperature and making sure they didn't burn. None of them, I would not consider this burnt. It's dark. It's not ideal, but I don't consider it burnt. You have to keep an eye on them very closely in the oven. Will I do this recipe again? Absolutely. Absolutely. So good. I'm actually going to write on my recipe card, I'm going to scratch out the salt and write in 1 tablespoon everything but the bagel seasoning. That just makes these so flavorful. Next time I make them, if I have a garlic powder at that point, I might use the garlic powder, but the onion powder was an absolutely wonderful substitute. The other thing I'm going to do differently when I make these again is I am not going to roll them quite so thin. These are like paper thin. They are so thin. They basically just melt in your mouth, and you cannot use something like this to dip unless the dip was really runny. You could not use these crackers for dip, and you really couldn't spread any like cheese or anything on them because they are so thin and so delicate. So the next time I make them, I'm going to roll them about twice as thick. I think I'm going to turn the oven temperature down a little bit because they're obviously going to have to bake longer. So that's my opinion of these crackers. They are just delectable, delicious, easy, didn't take hardly any time at all. In fact, the thing that took the longest was actually soaking the chia seeds. That took the longest. And I highly recommend that you give these savory crackers a try, especially if you are trying to be low carb. These are just wonderful. Our next recipe is going to be the sweet cracker, and we are going to be making some low carb, keto friendly graham crackers. These can be used for all kinds of things. You can crumble them up to make a graham cracker crust out of them. You can use them for s'mores. You can just eat them like cookies. So that's what we're going to do. And the first thing you need to do for this recipe is mix all of the dry ingredients. So that would include 2 cups of almond flour, 1/3 cup of your choice of sweetener. I'm using stevia, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of xanthan gum. Xanthan gum it kind of gives it a more of a fluffier texture. It's not a required ingredient, so if you don't have xanthan gum, don't worry about it. You can omit that. So you're going to just take a fork and whisk the dry ingredients together. In a separate bowl, you are going to put your wet ingredients, which includes 4 tablespoons of melted butter. This brown stuff is molasses. I'm just using the same spatula. 2 teaspoons of molasses. Now, if you want this to be completely 100% carb, like keto friendly, you can use a brown sugar artificial, it's not artificial, but brown sugar sweetener substitute. But I don't have that. Plus, all those types of sweeteners has erythritol in them, and I can't do erythritol. So that's why I just did my stevia and opted for the 2 teaspoons of molasses. Don't think it's going to add much in the way of carbs to this recipe. Then you add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And 1 egg. Then you add the wet ingredients to the dry ingredients, and you mix it really well till everything is combined and you have what looks like a dough. So just like we did with the savory crackers, we are going to roll these between parchment paper. And to do these crackers, I don't know if it's like for every cracker or if it, because these are low carb, basically gluten-free crackers, the parchment paper is a 100% necessity. I don't see any way you could possibly roll these out successfully without the parchment paper. But the difference between this cracker and the savory cracker is that these need to be rolled to a 1/4 of an inch depth. So I didn't think I could trust my eyes, and so what I did is I went out to the garage and I found a scrap piece of lath. These are exactly a 1/4 of an inch thick. I cut them to a decent length, sanded them just briefly just to get the rough edges off, cleaned them up really good, and treated them with this food safe wood protector stuff. And I'm going to keep these in my kitchen and use them for making crackers. And you put the dough between these and you roll your rolling pin until the dough is the thickness of the wood, and then that way they are a 1/4 of an inch thick. So I'm going to I'm going to divide this dough in half instead of fourths. Take it half at a time. And I've also got my oven at 300 degrees, not 400 degrees. Put this down, put another piece of parchment on top. Put my wood pieces on here, and I am going to roll this till it's a 1/4 of an inch thick. Well, it's not perfect, and it's a little thinner, I think, than a 1/4 of an inch. a little thinner than 1/4 of an inch, but I think it'll be all right. That's the best I can do. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this. It's said to be like specific to cut it into a 2x5 rectangle, but I am going to just eyeball it. And I'm gonna cut it in half. Like that. And then you take a fork and you poke the like classic graham cracker holes in it. Yeah, these are definitely thinner than 1/4 of an inch. So I will get these in the oven and practice on my next batch and see if I can get it a little bit better than that. You bake these, it says for 20 to 22 minutes, but since these are quite a bit thinner, I'm gonna put them in for 10 and then go from there. And like I said, I'm gonna practice and try to get better at this. My last attempt with the rest of the dough was definitely the best. And as I was rolling it, I was trying to keep it more in a rectangular shape. So it makes it just a little bit easier to make it look like graham crackers. But like I said, mine are going to be not exactly, not exactly like regular graham crackers. I don't know that there's any way you could make it exactly like you get it out of the store, because, I mean, I'm not a factory. I don't have the equipment. Crackers are done out of the oven. I let them cook a little longer. After I broke them apart, I flipped them over and let them cook for a couple more minutes because they weren't crispy. They were crispy around the edges, but they were not crispy in the middle, and graham crackers are crispy. So now they're crispy. They're not burnt. I don't even think they're overdone. So I'm going to give these a taste. Yeah, they're definitely crispy. These are fantastic too. Absolutely fantastic. They actually taste very much like a regular graham cracker. These would be really awesome for s'mores. I mean, the sugar, the marshmallow and the chocolate wouldn't be keto friendly, but you'd be saving carbs with the cracker. This would be good with like a pumpkin dip. Be good with even with jelly on it, peanut butter, jelly, or just eating them plain. Delicious. I went back and made another batch of these crackers, only I rolled them out with my spacer things so that they're thicker. Obviously they had to cook quite a bit longer, but they have some stability to them so that you could use them for crackers and cheese and meat, or with a dip. So you can either do it both ways. If you like them super thin, kind of like a tortilla chip, or if you want them more cracker size, roll them thicker. Just be aware you have to bake them longer. Alright friends, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've been enjoying Vlogtober, and I am really excited about these crackers. You store them in an airtight container. I'm just going to put them in a Ziploc bag, and I will be enjoying these for the next, who knows, however long it takes me to eat them. Olivia really liked them too, but because they're made with stevia and almonds, she can't eat very many of them. But I think Scott will like them as well. Alright friends, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section below. I will have these recipes written out in the description box below as well. Thanks so much for watching, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye, friends.